to the Magnificast, coming to you live from a room in a basement, this time at Greenville University. It's live and the audience is just Matt and me together right now. We just came from Subway. I ate a lot of carbs and feeling really sleepy right now, but not too sleepy to record this podcast. If you've never listened to this before, it's a podcast about Christianity and leftist politics. My name's Dean Detloff. I'm a PhD student at the Institute for Christian Studies in Toronto, and I do work on media and religion and leftism and politics, and I write as a journalist, and I make coffee, and sometimes I come all the way to Illinois.
I'm Matt. I teach media studies at Greenville University. My research interests are cultural studies, media archaeology, and Christianity leftist politics, and determining what is soup and what is a sandwich. Sort of got a really good sort of philosophy of food going on at the moment where everything is either soup or sandwich.
Yeah, I like it. Those
are the categories that it can be.
It works surprisingly well.
Yeah, try to think of something that's not a soup or a sandwich.
You can't.
Nope, impossible.
Matt's partner Shanna has been trying to do it all day, and man, it's not going well for her.
Nope, feel bad for her. But I got to teach her a lot of really good life lessons today about like how salsa is soup and everything else is a sandwich.
Yeah. Also, the changing states of food from soup into sandwich. For example, like a chocolate bar is at one point a sandwich, but at other points a soup.
It's a pretty esoteric but important metaphysics to get your mind around.
That's right. It's the only kind of dualism I allow into my ontology. Dualism between sandwich and soup.
Yeah, that's good. Oh man. Well, that's in the podcast.
It's a podcast about sandwich and soup.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, so this week is really cool because Dean is physically here in body and spirit. It's all here. All of it, 100%.
Here it is. I'm raising my eyebrows right now. You can't see it on the podcast, but Matt can.
Oof, they are raised. So Dean's here and hanging out, and it's been cool. We did a live show last night with like a handful of students from the university, and we talked about politics and Christianity. And at some point, you'll hear that, just not yet. You're going to hear this one first. You have to. It's mandatory. But just like always, I don't know, we're going to do the Marxist stuff, the Christian stuff, and get into it. So this week we're doing a Socialism 101 on the idea of human nature and dignity. These are some ideas that I think carry a lot of weight and importance for socialists and also Christians, and definitely the opponents of both, for sure. Too often, these ideas are co-opted and weaponized against leftists by conservative Christian forces. Conservative Christians love to talk about human dignity without ever talking about what it means. So to combat this, we want to talk about human nature and dignity in a way that's both Christian and explicitly Marxist. But before we do that, we're going to read some iTunes reviews.
Hey.
It's crazy. We've gone so long without any new ones, and now we got 3 new ones.
That was because we were complaining so hard last time.
Yeah, we've just been begging. So keep them coming, or we'll do it again.
That's all right.
Okay, so we have 3 reviews, and they're all pretty short, so I'm just going to do them really quick.
Lightning round. All
right. That was the voice that I used that I now regret. Okay, so the first review comes from username Coretto. I don't know who that is, but there you go. And they titled this review, "It's good, folks. 5 to 5 stars. Yep. Sometimes it's nice to take a break from the parade of irreverent secular leftist irony-tinged discourse and dive into some irreverent Christian leftist irony-tinged discourse." Yeah.
Tinged.
Just tinged.
Yeah.
We're not that ironic.
No. Serious Christian Marxists over here.
Yep. Cool. Thanks. That's nice. Okay. Another person with the username Lyris. Man, I shouldn't even read people's usernames, but I'm doing it, so whatever. They titled their review, "Thanks for your work, 5 to 5 stars.
You're welcome."
Yeah, you are so welcome. "Formative for my evolving ideology around Christian anarchy. Great for those who are just dipping their toes into the leftist podcast, but are alienated by by the raving far left lunatics. Just you wait, we'll rave."
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Evolving Christian anarchism. That's a neat thing. I don't know. We talk about a lot of Marxism on this podcast. Maybe someday we'll do an anarchist thing.
Yeah.
Every time we don't know what to do, we threaten each other with doing an anarchist episode, and one of these days, it's all we're going to have, so...
Someday we'll run out of ideas.
It's on the horizon.
It's not that there's anything wrong with Christian anarchism.
Yeah.
I think it's just like Dean and I were both there at one point in our lives, and maybe that point in our lives was also embarrassing. So maybe we don't want to revisit those ideas.
It's too much weird baggage.
Yeah.
Someone else needs to do that.
Yeah, I think Christian anarchism was cool, but just like for me, it was embarrassing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Same.
Great. Okay, and then the third review is by username Canonize Marx Now. Sounds good. I'll call it the Pope, I guess. And the name of
that red phone in your office, that's what that goes to?
That's where it goes to, yeah.
Nice.
The Pope directly. They named their review The Rock That the Revolution Will Be Built On, which is very good stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so Canonize Marx Now says, whether you're a lovely Leninist, a troubled Trotskyite, or a stressed Stalinist, you can rest assured that the Magnificast, I can't even pronounce the name of my own podcast. You can rest assured that the Magnificast will be the vanguard of the Christian socialist revolution. Kick back and praise the Lord as our hosts relate Marxist theory to Christian theology and end the Christian schisms for the establishment of fully automated, holy luxury, gay-based communism. Oof, that was a good one.
That was a good one.
We should just change the description of the podcast to that.
That entire review should be the subtitle of this podcast.
Yeah, and so
word for word.
I really love fully automated, holy luxury, gay-based communism. That's super good.
Yeah,
it's got all the good stuff in it.
No Elon Musk's allowed.
No Elon.
You're grounded.
You gotta stay on Venus, not communist Mars.
No.
Yeah, the
Red Rock.
Yeah, the Red Rock in the new Wolfenstein game. Okay, so in the previous one, you get to go to this Nazi base on the moon.
Yeah.
And in the newest one, though, you go to this Nazi base on Venus.
Mm-hmm.
So
hot base.
Hot base.
Hot Nazi base.
Yeah.
I want to go there.
Spoiler alert, I guess, for all you guys that out there playing Wolfenstein, on Venus is where they make all the Nazi propaganda films.
Nice. Go back and listen to that War on Cinema episode.
Yeah, for real. There's some good... Dude, Wolfenstein's such a good game. Sorry, that's just a leftover from the conversation we had last night, talking about gaming. And guess what? Wolfenstein is very good.
I've never played it one of these days.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's like... yeah, you never know. It's like brutal, man. You kill lots of Nazis, but it's like it's a good game. Not because you brutally kill Nazis, but not because of that.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those things that gets used against you when the Magnificast is eventually entered as evidence for something in a court of law.
Yeah, the FBI. There's like some nerd at the FBI writing, oh, he said he liked brutally murdering Nazis.
Sorry. Sorry, nerds.
Sorry, nerds. I don't know. All I'm saying is Wolfenstein is a great game. Okay. Neat. Well, thanks for those reviews. If you keep writing them, we will keep reading them. And we do like reading them because it's a good way to break up this podcast.
Yeah, that's holy cow. We need that good content.
Yeah, and you got to make it for us, and we will reap the benefits. Oh God, we accidentally capitalists.
No, it's a collective effort. It's a collective podcast.
Collective effort. There we go. You all own this, just to let you know.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I guess let's start off on this whole situation. Dean and I are kind of brainstorming about what kind of things we might want to talk about, and it seems like a good time to do another sort of 101 episode, kind of riding that idea from the Fidel and Religion book about, like, I don't know, we don't want reactionaries to use Christianity against working people and like oppressed classes, so we thought this would be a good time to like kick that off. So to do that, kind of get into it here, we were just kind of like thinking about ideas surrounding human dignity and like freedom and human nature. Those are all kinds of words that conservative Christians love to spit out and use to like discredit socialism and like just like I don't know things that they like to use to like as talking points against big government kind of things.
Yeah, we don't have to tell you. You already know. You've heard it 100 times.
You've heard it 100 times. So, well, here's a way into this conversation that'll be kind of fun. Because it's also dunking on the Acton Institute. Y'all, Acton Institute still sucks. So here we go. Back in August, the Acton Institute published an incredibly bad take on Venezuela that drew out the conclusion that socialism necessarily disrespects human dignity. That was kind of like the punchline of the article.
It wasn't funny, though.
It wasn't fun. It was a bad joke. The basic argument of the article is that, like, human dignity is respecting the freedom of individuals, and since socialism transgresses against freedom, it also transgresses against dignity. Okay, human dignity and socialism and like freedom and human nature are all words that are kind of like left undefined. Here's an example of like kind of the garbage in this article. Man cannot live according to the designs of socialism because it violates human nature itself. According to the Western view, which maybe we'll get back around to that bit here. According to the Western view, all human beings are created by God and share in the Imago Dei. Thus, mankind has a dignity that all public authorities must respect and preserve. So before we go any further, let's just talk about the Western view.
Yeah, that's a pretty contentious term.
Yeah, it is for sure. So in the article, when it starts talking about the Western view, it links to another article about like some weird like great books kind of college, and it talks about the Western view that holds humans to have like a high dignified status, and the low Eastern view. So let's just, I mean, we can just earmark that as like racist. So
Yeah.
And move on.
Yeah,
it is.
That's really all
Just
you said.
worth noting that that's
Yeah.
what they've done in their article.
Yeah, valorizing the West is always and every time a racist colonial venture. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't trust people who do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Okay. Well, anyways, Dean, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? Human nature and socialism and the Imago Dei, all of these words, they mean something. I'm not sure what they mean, though.
Yeah, well, words are only as good as their use. I'm a good Wittgensteinian that way. Probably a better Foucauldian. Words are only as good as the like power relationships that make them meaningful.
Yeah.
So yeah, human dignity. I don't know, what is it? Like you said, they don't ever talk about it in the article. So it's more interesting to ask why is it being used in a certain way? Because I mean, most people, like, I've heard a lot of arguments for why dignity is a bad way of structuring political discourse. That's probably fine. But in everyday conversation, if you were like, are you for or against human dignity? Most people would be like, well, I guess I'm for it. I'm for dignity. Yeah. Like, nobody's against human dignity. So to kind of use that as a negative thing is a really dirty polemical move, because you get people on your side without actually doing any work.
That's right.
Because you could just as easily say, well, capitalism doesn't exactly respect people's human dignity either. I mean, fighting for your survival every single day in a system that doesn't actually give you any kind of social mobility or like real life benefits, that doesn't really recognize your dignity either, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that the ways that dignity and human nature are used in these, at least in this Acting Institute article and like elsewhere in kind of rhetoric, are like enthymemic. So, quick.
That's a good word.
It's super good. So like the first thing you ever learn if you ever take a class in rhetoric is this word enthymeme, or maybe even in the logic class you'd learn it. An enthymeme is like an argument with one premise kind of implied, and it's kind of a tricky rhetorical move because like you can kind of just let your audience fill in the blank for like what the implication behind that is. And like here you see something that's basically that, right? Like if you say that socialism violates human dignity, you can like let your audience fill in what it is that like human dignity means to them, and then like they just agree with you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a silly thing. It's definitely a rhetorical turn that I don't know. I can't imagine the author using in good faith because they don't actually define their terms. I would imagine that's a pretty like purposeful and a purposeful sort of rhetorical move. Because if you like start explaining what you mean by human dignity or human nature, like people might be like, well, that's weird. So they don't.
Yeah.
And then people just agree.
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating about an article like this is there's nothing actually convincing in it. You kind of have to already be on the side of that argument before finding it compelling. Because if you ever asked of the article, just given the article, what's socialism, all it could do is kind of vaguely point you toward Venezuela, and not even in any kind of significant or good ways.
Yeah.
No ways that even explain why Venezuela is socialist. So it sort of rests entirely on assuming that you've already bought the premise, which, I mean, we all do it. It's not like that's unique to conservative capitalists or whatever. Marxists are always using like Marxist jargon just to make Marxists happy, and that's fine.
Well, I mean, it has on both sides of the issue, it has sort of a utilitarian purpose where you don't want to like, every single time you can't argue for like again and again why this is the case. But in a popular article written for like, an online thing, it serves a purpose.
Yeah. And it's just important in those kinds of things, even among Marxist discourse, to like figure out what an author might actually mean by terms that are sort of assumed to, like, we've all agreed on the definition of this term.
Yeah.
The Acton Institute will never say socialism is good, so naturally it has to be bad, right?
Right. That's right. Well, so what can we make of these kind of contentious terms here? Human nature and dignity.
Yeah, I love talking about human nature because I don't think it's real.
Yeah.
I'm just going to lay that out there right in the beginning.
Yeah.
But one cool thing about Marxism is that Marxists don't all agree on what human nature is either. It's kind of a live problem in Marxist conversations, or at least like a live issue that's up for discussion. So I don't know, this is oversimplifying probably, but there are at least two major kind of sub-disciplines in Marxism: humanist Marxists, anti-humanist Marxists. Humanist Marxists like to say that Marx has a really strong view of human nature, and humans are supposed to be free and creative, and capitalism is bad because it stops you from doing that, and it stifles your creativity in the interest of this kind of mechanized hellscape. And so the humanist Marxists are like, if we really want to respect humans, we'll get rid of capitalism. That's one. Anti-humanist Marxists are like, well, human beings are really only as good as what their social relationships say they are. And social relationships determine what people think humans are. And we should just have better humans, which means we should have better social relationships.
Right.
So there's no secret human thing that's being pinned down by capitalism or anything. It's just that capitalism has created, creatures that feel really uneasy about their lives, and that's not good. What if we made a system that made creatures feel good about their lives? That would be better. Yeah.
I think both of those ideas have some interesting merit. Personally, I tend towards the humanist side of Marxism because I like people. Well, I like people in theory.
Yeah, I feel like I tend more toward the anti-humanist side, but only because of the sort of philosophical baggage. I feel like humans are sort of the products of a lot of social relationships that kind of ebb and flow, and you can never really point to one thing and be like, that's what a human is.
Yeah.
That's what a human is for now. It's like what a human used to be. A human in the future, we don't really know what that is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, I guess there's some middle grounds to even find between those two terms.
Yeah, for sure.
Where humans can be more or less creative based on where they find themselves and what social relationships they exist within, but also what it means to be human kind of changes and transforms over time. The more different possibilities that become open to us, the more different types of people there can be.
Yeah, and I feel like that's actually, in my own life, that's been the best way to negotiate Marxism as a tradition of thinking.
Yeah.
Some Marxists get really pedantic about making you choose a side.
Yeah.
I think that's not very wise, because there's something that both of those interpretations of Marx are getting right about the situation. I don't know. I mean, Marx himself was divided on the issue. There's an early Marx who's really humanist, a later Marx that's potentially less humanist.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to be both, I guess, and be a good Marxist, but it's both of them are talking about real life situations that people kind of feel. Sometimes I feel like a human that's really free and creative, and I wish that was more free and creative. Sometimes I feel like a creature that's just kind of brought into being by a bunch of contingent forces, and I wish they were different. So, yeah, you don't need to choose.
Oh man, that's that good non-dogmatic Marxism right there.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, one of the ideas from Marx, from the early Marx, the young Marx, the Marx that Leninists love to hate, is this idea of species being. It comes out most acutely in the philosophic and economic manuscripts of 1844. These, quick historical note. These manuscripts were sort of found later, long after Marx had already died, and a lot of people, I don't know, just frame these as the young Marx before he developed into the full scientific socialist that he was. I don't really care about that. I mean, maybe that's
they're really fun to read. That was actually my introduction to Marx, was the young Marx. Really romantic, poetic. I don't know, draws you in.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, the economic and philosophical manuscripts are probably my second favorite thing that Marx ever wrote. It's so wild because, they are romantic. They do draw you in. I think they also describe exactly what it's like to work in wage labor, and
for sure.
It's so easy to connect to. I think his description of alienation is so strong because we all live it all the time.
Yeah, that's right. There's a great essay in those manuscripts on the power of money in bourgeois society.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and it changed my life. I was holy cow, money lets people do things they shouldn't be able to do. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So it's very simple and kind of nice in that way too.
Yeah. Another historical note about the philosophical and economic manuscripts that I like to think about when I'm feeling unproductive is that Marx wrote them when he was 26.
Bummer. Well, I missed my boat on that already.
Yeah, I know. I'm 3 years older than Marx when he wrote that, and I've not accomplished anything half as good. So that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Well, anyways, if you've never read those, go check it out. Check out Marxist.org or whatever. Look it up. It's really worth it. The bit on estranged labor or alienated labor, depending on the translation or whatever, is so cool. There's a bit in there that's just when you're working, you're not at home, and when you're at home, you're not at work. And like this sort of funny turn that's just like, while you're working, you're just kind of like going through the motions. You're kind of zombified, just living it out. And
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it strikes such a chord because it's just like, yeah, that is exactly what it's like to work a job that you hate.
Yeah. That's also something that humanist Marxists really like to talk about, alienation.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, anti-humanist ones do too, but it plays really well in the humanist kind of set of vocabulary because the idea is capitalism alienates you from what it means to be a human being.
Yeah.
Whatever that might mean, you can't really realize it when you're stuck working a crappy job that doesn't give you any chance to really reflect on your life and your situation in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, in that Acton Institute article, there's a lot wrong, but one thing that's really interesting in it to me is that it says that like one of Marx's biggest flaws was that he removed spirituality from people altogether. And well, like, yeah, because he was a materialist, so like there's a reason that happened. But what's kind of cool about the philosophical and economic manuscripts is that there is this actually kind of like quasi-spiritual aspect to it that I think is worth talking about. Right. Again, a thing that the humanists love. Not anti-humanists, not so much. But anyways, there's this word that comes out that's kind of a weird one that maybe we can think through a little bit. And the word is species being. Humans are species beings. And what that exactly means is kind of interesting. You have to read through it kind of carefully to get the kind of emerging sense from it. But Dean, what's up with the word species being?
I appreciate that segue. It's really hard. You have to be really careful. Hey, Dean, what is it? Thanks for that. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a bunch of really cool quotes that we sort of pulled out as we were checking all this out. So one, humanity is a species being, not only because in practice and in theory it adopts the species, its own as well as those of other things, as its object, but, and this is only another way of expressing it, Marx says, also because it treats itself as the actual living species, because the human treats itself as a universal and therefore a free being. I'll read another one, and then we can chat about them.
Yeah.
Another one to help us work this out. So Marx writes, in creating a world of objects by its personal activity in its work upon inorganic nature, humanity proves itself a conscious species being, i.e., as a being that treats the species as its own essential being, or that treats itself as a species being. Yeah, so there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot of really boring philosophical lineages you could trace, going through German idealism, going through Feuerbach, and kind of landing here in Marx in his unique way of picking all that tradition up. But let me take a stab at oversimplifying it, and then you can tell me if it's like we should add something to that.
Okay.
All right. So the idea here is that human beings, capitalism forces you to think of yourself as a sort of isolated individual. So if you think of modern kind of liberal ideas of what humans are, liberal in like a philosophy sense, not in just like a dang liberal sense, humans are essentially individuals who like meet in fields with no other contexts, and they like make contracts and make deals as fully formed rational adults, and they go away and they do it somewhere else. The idea being that they're all isolated all the time. You're free to just do whatever you want because you're an individual. That's what it's like to be in a capitalist society. Marx is basically calling bullshit on that as a real thing. So Marx is saying actually humans find themselves as participants in a broader whole of a human community, a human family. And what that means is you identify with that human family sometimes you don't, but you're part of it either way. And capitalism tries to sort of force you out of that experience. And that's, for humanist Marxists, really dehumanizing. It takes you out of what it would mean to be human, which would be to identify with a common species.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I think that's a good way to start thinking about it. There's the last part of that first quote you read is really interesting. He treats himself as the actual living species because he treats himself as a universal and therefore free being. It's kind of the sense that like it's just so it's hard for us because of liberalism, I think, and capitalism.
Yeah, but, that's right.
But like we recognize ourselves in other people, and like we recognize ourselves being a part of a larger community, a species, and like we identify our being with that larger species. We recognize that people like other than us have like similar desires and emotions and like, you know, exist like we do. And that's like a pretty fundamentally interesting distinction that we make that maybe other creatures don't. I have no idea.
Yeah, who could say?
Who can say, man? I don't know, like, what squirrels think about other squirrels. If they have, like, squirrels being. But
I like to mention dolphins have, like, pod being.
yeah, no, that's true, though. I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's a sense of cohesion between them as a species and, like, the others as species.
Yeah, or like elephants mourning dead elephants.
Yeah.
You know, there's something really sort of amazing about that.
Yeah, in one of my classes today, I mentioned very briefly vampire squids and how crazy they are. Vampire squids are wild because they like don't have species being.
That's right.
Vampire squids they only interact for 2 reasons. Okay, this is I think true, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a vampire squid expert, but like kind of I am. But as far as I know, they only interact for 2 reasons, and that is to mate or eat one another. So like they're creatures that have no species being. They have no sense of group cohesion, and maybe we could probably draw out some really interesting ideas about that. I mean, they live in complete darkness, and also in like a zone where there's no oxygen, basically in the ocean. So like
Places that are literally inhospitable to
yeah,
human life.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're so wildly different. They're like at the opposite pole of species being, right? It's like so
Yeah.
different from. They have no sense of like group or no sense of like they could never see another vampire squid and be like, oh yeah, you're what's hang.
Yeah, that's right.
More like let's do it and I'll
Yeah.
eat you.
Let's build the revolution.
Yeah, maybe. Well, anyways, so the point is though that like we like recognize ourselves as a part of a whole, and that's fundamentally interesting. And capitalism, I think, tries to break us from that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think this through in terms of what that article is arguing, right? That socialism fundamentally denies human nature or human dignity or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think what's so cool about negotiating the differences among Marxist opinion here is that that opinion expressed in the Acton article is dumb for at least 2 reasons, depending on which side of that debate you fall on. So the one side is like, if you're a good humanist Marxist, actually socialism is the only way that you can sort of affirm human nature in its plastic and important fullness, right? So humans can change, but they do so kind of together, working together, etc. If you're a good anti-humanist Marxist, well, socialism denies a certain idea about human nature, but it doesn't therefore deny that human beings are important. It just thinks that having an idea of human nature as you have one in capitalism fundamentally oppresses people, because it's the idea itself that motivates the system. So I think regardless, like the claim just sort of falls when you poke at it a little bit. The
Yeah,
Acton claim. That
Yeah,
is.
no, I think so. What about that second quote? In creating a world of objects by his personal activity in his work upon inorganic nature, man. The gendered language. Sorry, it's from the 1800s. So what can we do other than acknowledge that sucks? Man proves himself a conscious species being, as a being that treats the species as his own essential being, or that treats itself as a species being. There's a little bit more, I guess, like abstract thinking here, but you still get the same kind of idea that humans have some type of social cohesion and connection that are, I think, fundamentally defined by social relationships, and maybe made better or worse by those social relationships. Yeah. So the phrase that really sticks out to me though is that that humans treat the species as their own essential being. Like there's a recognition just like that people are the same, which seems like silly, and like I feel like I keep saying that over and over again, but like it should be a kind of a radical idea because we don't treat people like they're same. We live in a world where we think that we're like vampire squids and like we don't need anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's not true. We need solidarity. We need friends. We need comrades, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some kind of weird things about species being that can be potentially dangerous. I don't know. Maybe this will be my my mea culpa to folks who are listening and just like tearing their hair out right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Species being can be oppressive, right? Because sometimes you don't identify with the species that you're part of, and like that sucks a bunch. Also, those kinds of hard universalizing tendencies can underwrite some really bad habits in Marxist communities.
Yeah.
But I do think that nevertheless there's something being expressed here, right? And the most important point is probably the critical one. However you come down on the affirmative point is sort of up for grabs, but the critical point seems to be the same all around, which is that capitalism makes for bad relationships between human beings.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty clear why this is from a section to an essay about estranged labor. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
Labor alienates us from ourselves and from our connections to other people, and that's kind of like the point. That's why it's bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's another kind of part of this quote that I read earlier from the Acton Institute, and I think that a lot of the Acton Institute article, I don't even want to say who wrote it. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, don't even.
Yeah. Anyways, a lot of the article relies also on the idea of the Imago Dei, and that's kind of like a really interesting Christian idea that I think is good, but it's being interpreted in this really weird way here, or used sort of enthymemic in a way that like it's supposed to say something, but people read it and like, oh, that's a Christian word. I love that.
That's right.
Oh boy, I love you.
That word's in Latin. That phrase.
They're so smart. It's Latin.
That's right. The Imago Dei is so wild too because it's just a term that Christians don't know what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
Even theologians are like, I don't know. This is kind of my best guess right now. And either they have like a really weird biblical thing or they have a really weird kind of theological thing. Like one time, this is like a thing I was really into when I was an undergraduate, the Imago Dei. And I just remember like asking all my professors at this Christian university that I went to what they thought of it. And they all had wildly different answers, but they were all really smart Christian people, right?
Yeah.
Which I think just goes to show it's, I don't know, it's a term that you kind of have to make meaningful for yourself, like so many other things in Christianity. And to see how it gets deployed in polemical, argumentative essays is important because you have to ask what someone is trying to say with it or what someone's not trying to investigate with it.
Yeah, well, here's something that's kind of cool about Imago Dei. So it's not like I'm not a theologian. I'm like barely a philosopher.
Yeah, same.
So like, I don't know. I hear the word. I'm just like, and I do think like, oh boy, it's in Latin.
Yeah.
But like, here's kind of like an uplifting story, and it's something that kind of recontextualized the word for me just like very recently. So, if you guys have been listening to the podcast over the past few like months, past semester, you have heard me complain endlessly about basically my teaching load and everything else, and like, oh man. But anyways, you also know that I've been teaching this class on incarceration. So that class is like basically over now, and my students presented their final papers on it, and it was really awesome. In one of the presentations, my students were trying to figure out, I guess, trying to explain exactly why the incarcerated should matter to Christians. And basically what they said was like, I don't know, it's the Imago Dei, like that like
Nice.
Everyone has like the image of God on them, and it kind of gives them this sort of universal reason to care for them and stuff like that. And like they kind of used it in a way that I guess you could say is kind of like the Acton Institute, like you should care about people because they're made in the image of God. But in the context of incarceration, it kind of works differently because it's caring for people, but not like not in a super idealistic way, because they're like talking about how you get people out of jail. Like,
Right.
that seems actually very material and not idealistic at all. So I mean, like you have to recognize that like Christianity is to a certain extent like an idealistic religion. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like we've talked about this before, and like I don't know exactly how to reconcile that, but like you can.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, so Imago Dei is that type of thing though, where it is like idealistic. It's like like humans have worth because like they look like God. So like in some senses that is super idealistic, but if you think about Imago Dei in terms of incarnation, like it's actually pretty material. Just like the prisoners incarcerated in the United States quote justice system are like real physical people that have real physical needs, to show them to demonstrate an ethics or like care based on the Imago Dei means to show like real physical concern for those people. And just like I don't know, Jesus was a really incarcerated. Jesus wasn't incarcerated. Like Jesus was a real
bit.
Yeah, let me a little bit for a bit
for a few days.
Yeah, Jesus was incarnate in the sense like of being a material being as well, and not just like a spiritual like ghosty guy or something. I don't know. We can draw some, I think, really good materialist ways of thinking about the image of God in people.
Yeah, that's right. Also, as you were talking, sorry, I was looking at my phone, but I was looking up Acton Institute takes on private prisons just to see how the Imago Dei might function there.
Yeah.
Surprise. I don't know. It's not great. But suffice it to say, like, the Imago Dei matters when, I guess, I don't know, socialists are like trying to build a social society in Venezuela and they're having a hard time. But the Imago Dei doesn't matter when people are like incarcerated for probably, systemically stupid reasons.
Right.
So,
do they have any takes on private prisons?
I mean, so the Acton Institute isn't like a unified brand, I guess. But there are, if you'd like to Google around, there are plenty of individual folks arguing for private prisons on the grounds that
from the Acton Institute.
Yeah. On the grounds that, like, hey, they would do it really well because, you know, they can have, like, a personal relationship with prisoners. That's not even a joke.
Man, private prisons are so dumb though, because like you're making money off the incarceration of people. That's like so. It's like capitalism is exploitative, and then like private prisons are doubly exploitative.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do that.
Don't do that ever. That's so stupid.
Yeah. So Acton Institute doesn't care about the Imago Dei, whatever it is. That's my take.
Not consistently enough.
Whatever the Imago Dei is, the Acton Institute isn't actually interested in.
Yeah.
That's my polemical use of it.
Yeah.
That's my whatever that rhetorical term was that you used earlier.
Enthymeme.
Yeah, that's my enthymeme.
Heck yeah. In some ways, though, it seems like the Imago Dei, like as an idea, is kind of tied to species being.
Yeah, maybe.
They're like kind of similar things where you're like recognizing sort of a commonality between all people, like a universalizing principle behind like you know, you should care about people because like they are like God image stamped or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
And because they're part of your species. I don't know. Seems kind of the same thing to me.
Yeah, for sure. Why not? I'm into it.
Yeah.
Cue the wrath of 1,000 biblical scholars emailing us about that.
Yeah. All you dudes out there who think that we don't do a very good job with exegesis. Hey, we don't.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
Hey, so I do want to say one more thing about human nature, though. Just like brutally segueing us right back to where we came from. So there's a lot of cool stuff in Marx about human nature. There's a lot of cool stuff in Christianity about human nature. The Imago Dei is maybe one way of sorting that out or something. But one thing I really like is, I don't know, I have all this weird stuff about how human nature is really plastic. That's the thing I wrote my MA on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the coolest thing about talking about human nature is we get to ask questions like, what kind of humans do we actually want to be?
Yeah.
And what kind of humans do we actually want to sort of help usher into the world? And that's, I feel like, such a Christian idea, right? What kind of people are churches sort of supposed to form people into?
Yeah.
And what kinds of people are other institutions forming people into? I think there's one way of looking at that question that some sort of conservative writers that I won't name are into, where they'll say, well, the church should form itself or form people that oppose like consumerism, right? So the church has this kind of formative function. It's creating moral subjects in contrast to consumptive subjects. And that can seem like a really radical move. And in a way, it kind of is. I mean, yeah, you should be like a morally evaluative person before you're a consumer. That's true. But so often those kinds of questions don't go a step further by asking like, what kinds of persons would actually be willing to like change an entire mode of production such that it wouldn't be producing consuming subjects in the first place that you wouldn't have to combat. We talked about Christians for Socialism a long time ago, and I'm never going to stop talking about it.
Yeah,
and,
this is it forever.
Yeah. What I love so much about that project is that's basically what they're suggesting, is like for the first time in Chile, we finally have a government that's trying to form human beings that aren't consumptive, like, you know, producers and consumers, and that's it. And as a church, like, we're going to help them produce people that are willing to, like, work together toward different ends. And I think talking about human nature in that kind of way, with a sort of more open-ended perspective, is a really good thing that Christians can get behind just as readily as like Marxists.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I know speaking from my own Protestant experience and like the understandings of human nature, right? Like Protestants love to think that humans are just like very bad.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I guess Catholics probably do too, but that's like not my experience, so who knows? But you know, like total depravity and those kinds of ideas, and like even like original sin just kind of paints humans as like just initially bad things.
Yeah, for sure.
And like I don't know if like humans have a proclivity towards sin or something. I don't really know if that's true. Again, like all those theology nerds out there probably screaming, but whatever. Don't care. Come say it to my face or on Twitter. No, just keep it to yourself. But something that the church does or has done historically is like spiritual formation and moral formation, and like it's actually good at that. I don't know, like using a Foucauldian sort of term, an idea, but like discipline is good. It makes people like what they are, and that's how you do it, is through sort of regimes of discipline.
And everybody has one. It's just that some of them are obvious and some of them are not.
And some of them are good and some of them are bad.
Yeah.
I mean, so like discipline, we usually just think of like as a really negative connotation about like, you know, your dad has a belt or something and he's going to like, you're in trouble for stealing cookies.
You had a weird childhood, man.
No, that's a bad dad. No, that's not my experience at all, actually. No, but the idea, or like a really authoritarian regime, you have to, or the caricatures that people paint of North Korea. That's like what you think of discipline as, like, oh, everyone has to have the same haircut, which is completely stupid American propaganda.
Right.
But the idea instead is just like, I don't know, the things that you do sedimented over time have a real effect on like your life, and church is a part of that for sure, right?
Right.
It's one of those factors alongside work and alongside consumption that like have some kind of impact on your life. So let's try to make different people.
Yeah, we should make different people. I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
The ones we have are not that great.
Not great.
I would like to be a different person. So.
Yeah. Well, you can, but you gotta go to church.
Yeah, well, I try my best. Yeah, so I don't know, like, I think one reason that talking about human nature as a kind of 101 episode is really interesting is that a lot of objections that anti-communists have revolve around capitalism being sort of the one system that respects human nature or agrees with it or whatever. And that take is so bad. Derek Ford had a really funny tweet a while back, just recently, where he said something like, I wonder what the innovative motivation was for the first people who discovered fire, who made fire. And I thought that was like so great because obviously, I don't know, in that like mythology of humans discovering fire, there wasn't capitalism, but like they did it anyway.
Yeah.
And I like that so much because I feel like people have a duty to basically be like, listen, talking about human nature is not a defense of capitalism because there's no human nature that actually underwrites this. There have been times in history where people weren't capitalist.
Yeah.
There will be times in history when people aren't capitalist if we survive.
Yeah, that's right.
If we survive capitalism.
Post-apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just like good to keep pressing that because it isn't the case that capitalism is somehow like defined by God in a law that ordained to the world. I mean, that's not only theologically dumb, but historically obviously untrue.
Yeah. I think the Acton Institute, well, at least this article and others, some of their problem too is that they valorize the West, right? So they think that like, oh, of course they are, because the West is all the good ideas and whatever. So
yeah. Which is actually a really self-defeating argument, right? Because if it's just human nature to like believe in that, then why would the West believe in it and other places don't? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, basically, it's very stupid.
Daily reminder: Acton Institute is dumb, and if you don't hear it tomorrow, say it yourself. Be the daily reminder you want to see in the world.
Look in your mirror and repeat: Acton Institute is dumb.
Yeah, but don't do it 3 times with the lights off.
Oh my gosh, they show up behind you.
Yeah, that's right.
And then they get you, and they like.
It's just your boss.
Yeah, it's just your boss. And he says, "You got to work more hours this week."
Yeah, that's right, for no pay.
Yeah, Acton Institute would love that.
You're in prison.
One more note about this article that I think is really funny, that actually has nothing to do with the topic at hand. Did you know that there's actually a person named Lord Acton, and that's where the name comes from?
Yeah, I do.
Oh my gosh.
I love that it's Lord Acton that free market capitalists are always quoting.
Right, does that not strike them as completely ironic? Like, oh, Lord Acton says this. Like, he was he must, like, you know.
He's the guy who said, like, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, also, like, a leftover of a defunct feudal system.
Yeah.
So maybe take your cues from someone else.
Okay.
Let's talk about dignity really quick.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about dignity really quick.
Okay. So the one thing that's left in this article that we haven't quite referenced yet is the idea of dignity, and that socialism necessarily transgresses it. So if we kind of read between the lines here in this Acton Institute article, it seems like dignity means something, like, has something to do with freedom. I'm not 100% sure, like, what about freedom?
Or like human rights. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is hard to tell.
The Venezuela thing.
Right. So it's not exactly clear what they mean by the word dignity. And like you said earlier, maybe dignity isn't the best way to talk about politics, but I think it's one way to talk about it, at least from the standpoint of humanism. What does it mean to be a person with dignity, and how do you recognize that in someone? I think that the Acton Institute would probably default to some kind of explanation about, like, you know, freedom to make economic choices or something like that.
Yeah, like rights-bearing individuals or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think that there's an idea of dignity that can come from a Marxist point of view?
I don't know, man. It's hard to say. I'm not on the dignity train, but probably. Why not?
Yeah.
I know, like, the one thing that dignity has going for it is that it is a term with moral weight. Like, it still has moral weight.
Yeah.
And that's important rhetorically. I mean, whatever you think about it philosophically, it makes people think about things.
Yeah.
And, like if Bernie Sanders gets up at a rally or whatever and he talks about how, like, people don't treat the poor with dignity, everyone knows what he means.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's an empty meme as well, but
yeah, exactly.
that's okay because it's Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, dignity is a weird term. I feel like dignity is a weird term because it's sort of a defensive term, right? But defensive terms can be useful if you're a Marxist. Like, the dignity of the poor should always be respected. But the trouble is it gets co-opted in these discourses on things like Venezuela, right? Where people are getting injured and killed in struggles for socialism, right? Yeah. And the trouble is dignity only ever cuts one way when conservatives use it. Yeah. It only ever cuts against people who are... I don't know, like standing up for systems that don't respect people's dignity. Yeah. If you want to play the dignity game. So, yeah, it's a weird word in that way for me because it kind of just gets sucked up into these really weird, esoteric, like, linguistic games. But yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think two things about it. So first of all, the word dignity always makes me think of my life verse. Do you know that if you're Protestant, you have to have a life verse?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was supposed to have one at one time at like Cornerstone University, but I couldn't tell you what it is now. So that life is over.
Yeah, mine is a workman is worth his wage.
Nice. I like that.
It's a good one. It's, a great verse. And I love to quote it at people. I guess it makes me think of dignity because it means that you should be paid for your labor. I think that's really important. And when it was probably written, they didn't think about it in terms of like owning the means of production or something, but I think you could. I think it incorporates that. Not? Yeah, why not? One other note about dignity that I think is worth mentioning too is one time I saw Richard Gilman Opolsky. It was the guy that wrote Spectres of Revolt. Yeah. Y'all know him because we talk about it constantly. One time he went to a bookstore and kind of gave a talk about one of his new books. It wasn't the Spectres of Revolt one. It was his book Precarious Communism. Anyway, so he gave this entire talk that was about the idea of dignity in labor. And it was pretty cool because basically he was just like, dignity is when people have the ability to self-determine their own lives and their own labor. So not that's just cool. I think that's a more helpful way of framing the term dignity, or maybe a way to define that term in a way that is explicitly leftist and Marxist.
Yeah, for sure.
So if that's the case, then dignity means like having like a means like to live. Yeah. And to choose whether or not you want to enter into like an exploitative relationship with like some type of corporate power.
Yeah, the self-determination part I think is key there. And the challenge back to these kinds of conservative defenses of dignity on that grounds at least is that people don't have that space in capitalism, despite the fact that capitalism says that they do. And that's the important thing to kind of keep pressing.
Yeah. So I think that thinking of dignity in terms of economic freedom is kind of interesting, but maybe a different type of economic freedom. Like dignity is like being able to live your life and not have to like work in a call center and like, or like, not have to like go to your job at Taco Bell and pretend you like it. Like to live a dignified life is to live one where you don't have to be exploited every single day so you can make it.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. Sure. I'll take that dignity.
Are you on the dignity train now?
No.
Choo-choo.
But if I had to be, that's the car I would get in on.
All right, sounds good. It's a good car. It's the dining car.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's just full of...
The dignity car. I thought something would come out, but it didn't.
There's nothing there.
No, sorry, everyone. It's the subway coma. It's really hitting me right now.
Thanks for listening to Magnificast. If you haven't already, you should follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, because we update it now. It's a thing we do since we noticed we didn't do it. Follow us on SoundCloud. I still don't know what you do on SoundCloud. I don't know the social media aspect of that one.
I don't even think I follow us on SoundCloud.
I don't think so. I don't think I do anything. Like us on iTunes, subscribe to us on iTunes. Again, don't know how that works. But what you could do that'd be really helpful, that would just be really great, is you could give us like $1 on Patreon, or you could also just give us a comment or a review on iTunes. That'd be good.
That would be good. T-shirts, that's still a thing that's happening. We're getting getting those T-shirts.
They're happening. We're working it out right now, but
they're pre-order them.
Going to be so cool.
They are. That's pretty good. Buttons still on the way. One of these days, you'll see one in the mail.
Yeah, man. Sorry, the end of the semester's been so crazy, and I just haven't done it.
It's pretty rough.
Yep. Cool. Anyways, thanks for listening. See you next time. Here's the illogical spoon. I don't want to get up for church in the morning, souls alive.
Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation. Never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between us and our Lord. Jackson, keep your hoods up. Keep your hoods up.